That's right. It's time for talking about design. I've been waiting to do this for so long. You are at the Student Showcase focused on design, some of my favorite classes that we have here at School Motion. And to get this thing started, we also have another person here that's going to be talking design with us. Can we get Frank on this call? Where's Frank? I know you're in there somewhere.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
What's up, dude?
What's going on?
How are you doing today, Frank? Are you excited? Are you as excited as I am?
I am super excited to talk shop about design. This is one of the topics that's become hot off the press for
Yeah.
a
Are
lot
you
of
are
our
you
students.
surrounded
That's
by
what I
all
love
your
it.
favorite? Are you surrounded by all your favorite designers? I've got all my nerd books here. I'm surrounding myself with the gods, the design gods of the world. Um, we have been dying to do these student showcases, and EJ knocked it out of the park yesterday, talking about 3D, but
Yep.
especially for design, I think it's the hidden gem in terms of whatever you want to call it, verticals, specifics, like whatever electives, whatever you want to call it. For me, even though it's called motion design, I think a lot of us forget that design is still part of the title of our industry and the name.
Yep.
And I think the solution to all of your motion problems actually lies in design most of the time. You can fight me later about that if you think so. But Frank, what
I
before we
agree
get
with you.
started, what are you so excited about to see today, to see from the different classes that we have?
Oh, I'm super excited about the lineup of students that we have.
Mhm.
We have some great work that we want to show, and just really talking about design. As I've TA'd a lot of classes from animation to design, it's the one topic that always comes up. It's like the common denominator that no matter if you're doing like starting in animation or you're doing VFX or you're doing like even expressions,
Mhm.
design is always the question that comes up. And so to me, it's like if you get this, it's like a superpower because no matter
Mhm.
what you're doing, you're going to be able to solve a lot of problems.
What do you? This is a big question all the time. You hear people throw the word design out all the time. They're like, "Oh, you got to get better at design. You got to know the fundamental." What is design in your book? Like, do you have like a pitch or like a one line like elevator statement about like what's design? Why is it important? If I'm an animator, who cares?
Totally. So I talk about this actually in TAB, which is a new course that we're going to have soon for teaching assistant bootcamp. It's only for RTAs, but I talk about briefly the difference between art and design. And obviously,
Mhm.
art is something that is done just for the sake of it. So you don't have to have a reason for it.
Mhm.
But design has to be functional. So it has to serve a purpose, whether you're communicating an idea for marketing or entertainment or whatever it is, it must be able to hit the mark. And so
Mhm.
design differs in that sense. So it has to be able to communicate well through the principles of design, you know, which are many. We can probably geek out about that later, but it has to be able to serve a function
Mhm.
in your work.
Well, we better be
Yeah.
geeking out about them. We better be
Yeah.
talking about the specifics. So I will say yes, and I also feel like while we're trying to learn everything, right? We've got Unreal, we've got Blender, we've got Procreate, we've got all these tools coming up and like hitting us in the face that we have to learn. But the one software package that I think if you learn well and you learn it once, you never have to learn it again. Design is just another software package, just like After Effects, just like Photoshop, just like Cinema 4D. It takes a while to learn. You have to do
Yep.
the 10,000 drawings, right? You have to put the time in. You have to have somebody that can tell you when you're doing it wrong. Otherwise, you're making the same mistakes. But I really think it's like one of the most valuable things for anybody, anyone. If you're an animator, if you're a designer, if you're a rigger, if you're a producer, I really feel like design is like the hidden, you said it perfectly, the hidden superpower. And it's the language that binds and ties everything else you're ever going to do.
Yeah.
I'll probably talk about it later, but I have some big theories about like how a lot of your biggest animation fears or worries or concerns are actually design problems. But we'll get into that later. That
100%.
that
Yep.
that will come up sometime.
I love
So
that analogy you're using, by the way. I want to steal it. You know, it's like the one piece of software because a lot of us don't think of it that way. We think
yeah.
like design is like this thing out there that you got to learn. It's so vague, but it actually has principles.
Mhm.
And if you learn it, like if you learn a piece of software, the great thing about it is like Adobe is not going to come and like update it and change
Exactly.
everything about it. You're going to be able
Yeah.
to learn kind of like the design
Yeah.
principles you need, and you're done.
Maxon's not going to change the interface on you. Like it's not going to happen. I mean, that's a great analogy though too. I think as well as that, like in Cinema 4D, the day you open Maxon, anything from Maxon, that there's like complete tool sets that you may never touch in the program, right? But
Yep.
that they're there for you. Design's exactly the same way, right? Like you can as long as you have an understanding of the fundamentals of each of those, right? Of contrast, of type, of color, of shape layout, of foreground background interactions. Like if you know the basics, you don't have to dive into all the individual specific tools, but you have the understanding that they exist, right? And
Yep.
there'll come a time when you get to play with them and experiment with them. So I really, in my head, I actually do think of it like there's just a bunch of menus, and I'm pulling down this shelf today, and I haven't touched it in like a year or two, but I'm coming back to it. So I want to explain a little bit about the showcase, just the concept, how this is going to work for everybody. So we have officially four design courses. Photoshop, Illustrator, Unleashed. That's kind of like your entry level. You're coming in the door and you just want to learn the tools, but we're going to sneak some design in there while you're learning the tools. Once you're confident with those tools, there's also Design Kickstart, which is essentially teaching you all the fundamentals you could ever possibly want to know. And you're getting exercises, kind of learn them at like the most rudimentary value. It's really like learning how to work out. It's kind of like going to the gym and working out. But then Design Bootcamp is kind of like getting in the field and playing the game. It's all project-based. Everything is kind of mimicking what you would get if you were in a studio, if you're a designer working for a motion design studio. So you're taking all those things you were exercising and you're actually creating, final products with them. Hidden in there is an amazing class called Illustration for Motion from Sarah Beth Morgan that a lot of people probably don't think of it as a design class. They just think of it as like a drawing class, but all the design fundamentals are like reaffirmed, and it's probably actually the most thorough of all the design classes, but it's kind of hidden under the surface. So we're going to talk about three of those. It'll be PSAI Unleashed, Illustration for Motion, Design Bootcamp. We're going to do a critique. We're going to roll off to a pre-recorded video that Frank's gone through to show you, if you take one of these courses, what a critique is going to be like, what you can expect, in terms of thoroughness, and how we try to elevate you through kind of the critiques themselves. And then we probably will do a little bit of talking about the class, talking a little bit about the person's work, and then move on to the next class. And this is going to culminate in, we're going to be talking about a specific person design bootcamp that we are going to have live with you. So Frank, who are we having live with us for a design bootcamp?
We have the amazing Gina with us today, Gina Taylor, and we are super excited about her work. She has just taken a lot of our courses and done a lot of the homework assignments, but she's put her own spin on some of these, and her design work is just fantastic. So we're going to be able to see kind of design from the design bootcamp, but then also how she applied it to a little bit of other classes. So yeah, super excited to talk to her.
Before we even get to her, I just want to say one of the things I love about Gina in almost every class that I've looked at her homework is that you can take school of motion a lot of different ways, right? You can just show up, you can do the assignments and learn the tools, learn the fundamentals. You can save it for a rainy day and just kind of like shotgun it over the course of a couple of weekends if you really want to. But what Gina does is, I think the optimal way of doing it is that she takes the class with the TA, with the other people, but she almost always makes the really important assignments her own. So if you've seen the same assignment over and over and over, you don't see that with Gina. You see her take the concepts, but she makes it, even in some of the animation classes she's taken, she's redesigned the assignment from scratch, and it becomes an amazing demo reel piece, right? It becomes an amazing showcase piece. So I think in the chat, if you have any questions for Gina, definitely they should be dropping in her website. Take a look at it. In a little while, she'll be on live, and we will be able to take your questions and be able to forward them straight on to Gina. So we'd love to have it be as close to a conversation as possible. But I think we probably should jump to Photoshop and Illustrator Unleashed. Frank, tell us a little bit more about just like this class, who it's for, and what the assignment kind of goals are within it.
Yeah, totally. This is a class taught by Jake Bartlett, the amazing Jake Bartlett, and it is just jam-packed with not only how to use the best workflows for Photoshop and Illustrator, but then how to think about using them for motion, prepping up your files. The important thing is that, even people that say, oh, I know how to use Photoshop, I know how to use Illustrator, like I went through the class and I learned a bunch of like little tips and tricks that I was like, oh my gosh, I've been using Illustrator for 10 years. And I didn't know I could do this, or I can do it in this way. So you definitely learn from Jake kind of best practices to use. And going back to the idea of design, it is not technically a design class because we're learning how to use the tools, but there's no way you can use the tools if you don't design. In other words, like you're going to use the tools, but the way you're going to practice is by designing. So design is kind of implicit. It's kind of like, the air that you breathe. If there's no air, you can't breathe. And so if there's no design, you can't use the tool. So definitely there's design involved in there, and it's geared towards beginners. So it starts off, very simple, how to use the tools, how to use the shape layers in Illustrator, the pen tool. And so, yeah, That's basically the class.
Well, I will say, I think everybody out there, unless you are a professional like designer working in a studio, odds are, even if you've been using both the tools, you probably feel a little bit biased towards one or the other, right? There's probably
Mhm.
one where it's your sweet spot, and there's another one that just doesn't make a lot of sense. For me,
Yeah.
it's Illustrator. It's like my least favorite tool, but going through Jake's class, he does a great job of balancing. If you've learned something one way, this is how the other tool works and why you would want to reach for this tool at this time, right?
Yep.
Like there's reasons for using the shape layers, there's reasons for using the pen tool or the type tool within it. And it's all integrated also into how you work with motion at the same time, which is a really great thing. And
Totally.
the last thing I will say about this class is that I have to get a plugin for Demo Reel Dash because one of the assignments we have is to actually make a title card, and 90% of the time, I can always tell when I'm looking at someone's demo reel from the very first shot with their name, whether or not they are a designer or they're just faking it till they make it. And it's almost always just because their use of and choice of type and all the ways of fiddling with type. So that's just a little hint that like if
You
you
listening to that out
really
there, people? This is important. This is a guy that sits down and was looking at hundreds of demo reels to hire people, and within the first 2 seconds, he would turn something off just because of type. So you may have an amazing reel to put together, and then if your type is like not good, it's
yeah.
sad. But you have a work to do, and you're like super busy, and you're trying to squeeze in a lot of demo reels, and maybe your demo reel is not making it to the right person just because of the type design thing. So
Yeah, it's
important.
sad to say, but sometimes when you're watching demo reels and you've got a stack of them, you're looking for a reason to not keep going. And
Yep.
design is like the easiest one to just be like, well, if I'm hiring somebody who's a generalist, I need to know that they can design. I can't train them to be a designer. And just
Yep.
that simple thing, your color, your type, your layout, those three things are super important. I think this is a good time to talk about who our critique is going to be for PSA Unleashed. It's Kaitlyn Murray.
Yep.
She's taken a lot of different classes. She's taken C40 Basecamp and PSA Unleashed. Before we dive into the critique, do you want to set this up at all, Frank, in terms of what the assignment was and what you kind of see all the time from people putting this assignment up on the homework lockers?
Yeah, totally. So if you watched the stream yesterday, we had the awesome Luis Miranda. He did a couple of critiques, and one of the things he said on there is like, this is a critique, so we always have to have a critique on there. And you're going to notice that probably for my first two that I'm going to talk about today, these were already final assignments that had already had a lot of critique prior to this point.
Right.
So at this point, what I'm doing is I'm kind of showcasing the work and why certain things are working. So I'm going very deep into like, okay, this is working because of, this design principle, and this is working because of this other design principle. So it may not be so much like change this here, change that there, because these assignments are kind of like the final ones. She really took this assignment and ran with it. She had a very specific style that she was going for, and I think it worked out pretty well. This assignment is kind of the combination of all that you learn in the class. So you're going to be using vector files. You're going to be using Photoshop. You're going to be doing color correction. You're going to be doing typography. You're going to be doing texturing. So it all kind of comes in. You're going to be doing outlining images with hair. So you're really just putting all your tools into this one assignment. So it's exciting to see.
Awesome. Well, I think let's to the man behind the curtain back there. Let's roll the critique, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
Hi, Kaitlyn. This is Frank, and this is a review of your Eye the Tiger boards, which came out awesome. I'm super proud of the work that you did. And yeah, let's jump right in. So I kind of want to tackle this from two separate places. One is the actual execution of the project itself. This is a Photoshop and Illustrator Unleashed class. And so we're learning design, but primarily we're trying to focus on using the tools correctly, using Photoshop, using Illustrator, and understanding when it's best to use one or the other, understanding some basic workflows, and how to be able to create a design using the tool. So in the actual execution of the assignment using the software, you nailed it. You have really good use of the software. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out before I move on to talk about the actual design, which is very well done. A lot of things that are happening here that are working well is your use of typography. You're using your Illustrator files as well to make sure that you bring in vector images in here. So that's working really, really nicely. One thing that is also working very well in your use of Photoshop is the way that you were able to integrate all the images to look cohesive. And yes, this is part of the design process, but it also takes some knowledge of how to use Photoshop. And I just want to focus on this first image here for a second, because this is a good example of that. We had a 3D element, we had kind of these, photographs, we had text, we have an image, and yet somehow you were able to bring it all together to have a cohesive look, even with the bears here. And when I look in your file, I see why. It's because you spent really a good amount of time going in here and really making sure that things had the right color correction and the right treatment for it to look cohesive. So if I untick these adjustment layers here, I can see kind of where the original artwork was, the original image. And let me do that for the rest so we kind of get a sense for just how different this was. So this was kind of the original. Actually, it didn't have a stroke. So this was the original. And you can see how the styles don't match. This looks kind of 3D. This looks very flat, but yet by you adding all those elements in there, a stroke, to bring this into the same style language, the same design language as the rest of your piece, it's working very well. Then, the color correction where we're adding all that saturation and flattening the image, it's just really making it much more cohesive. Did I miss one in there? Oh, yeah, these right here. There we go. So now by adding all those adjustment layers in there, you were able to bring the image, into that kind of cohesive look where everything looks like it's part of the same design, almost like it was drawn in there. So really, really nicely done in terms of the execution and using the software. Then the rest is just really good design decisions. Overall, let me kind of start from the end. Your final rendering or your final kind of bringing everything together is really well done. You're using textures very well. And then you're also adding noise to everything, which is kind of helps solidify everything. So, that noise kind of carrying through on every image. It's just when you look at it as a whole, it's working very, very well. So execution, top notch, really well done. Really nice to see you master the software and be able to, cut things out and do things in a way that's really working together. In terms of the design, I really think that you nailed this very, very nicely as well. Now, you're going for kind of this retro kung fu, almost comic book feel to it of nostalgia, and I think it's worked very, very well. Anyone that grew up in the 80s and maybe was used to seeing a lot of these images can know that it feels authentic in the images that you've chosen. A lot of high contrast, a lot of kind of lower detail in some areas, but a lot of high contrast in the colors. And that is really, really nicely done as well. That's helping the design to stand out and breathe. Even though it's kind of this throwback to design that was probably over the top and put together in a way that was, maybe nowadays we wouldn't design things this way for, products, but it definitely fits within that style that you were going for. So definitely as an homage to the style, definitely nailed it. So really, really well done. And some of the things that are working well here, I just took some time to draw up some lines. These are not perfect, but very simple rules of thirds. And if I go kind of in here and I look at, most of your images, a lot of your designs are falling within those, places where the rule of thirds are. And, this, for people that are starting out in design, this is really, a lot of the key is start simple, use tried and true methods of design that work well. This image, for example, you have your bear lined up in one of the lines, and you have your title in another one of the lines and another one of the corners. You're also using a very strong use of repetition here. This repeating the bear kind of in the background with less contrast, but it's, that repetition is really drawing the eye into to create a communication with this image and the other image, kind of this back and forth, and it's really helping the design as well. So these aren't just kind of random things that work. I can see that you put the effort in making these work. Again, your main title is along this line here. You have your ladders here. You have your titles here. And everywhere I look, I just see that you really used your rule of thirds, and it paid off well. It really helped to make the design work cohesively, even though there was so much going on in terms of images and titles and even different fonts, which is super tricky to get right. If you would have not thought through your design and the placement of your titles, even this would definitely not have worked as well. So kudos to you for making that work. Some final thoughts overall. I think your color palette is really well picked out, and I can see on here, I just kind of hit it, but you were really referencing your color palette throughout, and that's something that sometimes as students we can miss, is the importance of keeping things consistent. And I can see that you had it in 3 different places, which tells me that you were looking around and making sure that you follow your color palette and you were being consistent in your choice of colors. So really nicely done. And yeah, I think overall this is a fantastic work. Super proud of what you did and super proud of you finishing the course.
Amazing. Hey,
Kaitlyn.
I think Kaitlyn's in the chat. Hello, Kaitlyn. Nice to see you. We're going to just rave about your work for a little bit longer. I think one of the things that impressed me the most about this is that it's so easy to get lost in type, especially when you're using really stylized type that's being used to create a specific tone. Mm-hmm. It still needs to be readable, right? It still needs to be legible. There still needs to be a hierarchy in each individual image, but then also across the images. Let's see if I can do this. I love... see if I can share my screen. Let's get this going. I love just the range of stuff that's going on, but it still feels holistically all part of the same thing, right? I love just taking stuff into sections, like it's a story, right? Or there's a first, a second, and a third act. And even in here, right? This is a really difficult frame to pull off. There's so much going on that it'd be very easy to just have the type all stacked on top of each other. I mean, let's count 1, 2, 3, at least 3 different fonts that are very stylized, right? It's not just like a serif and a sans serif. These 2 fonts would normally be really fighting for attention to each other, right? Oh, yeah. But because of the flow, right? Like if you look at this, there's almost literally visually an X. There's a circle in the center to draw your attention, but there's places for your eyes to go. There aren't really any tangents. There's nothing that's really even down here, it doesn't feel like it's sitting on top of each other. Yep. There's just at every level, at a macro level and at a micro level, the stuff works. And I think one of the interesting things you talked about was how there's a lot of stuff that acts almost like the glue between these very disparate parts, right? Choosing red over the top of green, that helps your eye go straight to here. This is the highest amount of contrast color-wise, right? But then your eye flows. There's literally a flow, introducing flows all the way through here, and then your eye kind of circles back and goes up. There's no wasted space. The only thing that was even if you're getting super technical is right here, they're almost touching a little bit too much. You'd almost even want to make it a little bit smaller, but it's the tiniest, dumbest little thing. Yeah, and totally. I love what you talked about, tying these photographic elements into something that felt more like a wheat paste poster or a billboard poster. And I doubt this will come through in the stream, but there's even just this really nice level of grain. It's not noise, but it's some type of textured grain that goes over the top of it. The other thing too is that if you actually were to desaturate this and just make it black and white, you can see the levels contrast are working as well, right? You have the color contrast, and then you have the darkest black and white connecting to the darkest black and white. There's just so many things. We could talk forever about each one of these if we wanted to, but I think there's great storytelling. There's great individual imagery. There's a lot of variety as well too. She's not using the same trick every time to flow through. Here we actually have the type actually breaking the frame. There's still that really great use of value contrast. The highest contrast is the thing we want people to read on the roof, and then everything else has been pulled down. The darkest darks are not as dark as the actual type, and they've been unified to sit in the background with the color. It's a cool color against a warm color for the type. We probably should stop and move on at some point, yeah. But there's so much there to really study and learn. I struggle to try to sometimes with these assignments to like find things to critique, but that's also when you realize like someone achieved the actual assignment, right? This is the end of however, I don't know how many weeks this is. Is it 10 weeks? Is it 12 weeks?
This is a 8-week course,
8
I
weeks.
believe,
So
or
that's a lot
12.
to learn. That's a
Yeah.
lot to learn in 8 weeks because everything we just talked about actually was design fundamentals. We weren't talking about like mastery just now about like specific tools, right? Like one thing that I think is a really good sign of somebody who knows the tools on top of the design is when you go in the files and they're clean enough for Frank to actually go in and critique them. The
Yep.
use of things like smart objects, of adjustment layers inside nested groups, layer styles, blending modes, even going into the layer styles where you normally would play with like the procedural strokes and the glows and all the kind of cheesy stuff. There's some blend if kind of fun stuff that you can play with there to help like blend stuff together in a way that's very hard to achieve otherwise. All that's on display here. Like it's pretty amazing that it's all in one place. Before we move on, I also just wanted to like see if we could make sure that we show Kaitlyn's Instagram because you're definitely going to want to follow everybody that we show here. We'll try to show everybody's socials as much as possible. But Kaitlyn has a ton of really cool patterns, and they're not just kind of just like illustrations or just spot colors. They're really cool repeating sometimes characters. I'm a sucker for anything to do with Ted Lasso, and she has a really funny lead tasso post. So definitely check out Kaitlyn Murray. We'll probably link it up, but take a look at her Instagram for sure to just get more of an idea of like the character behind the work that someone's doing as a student. This is one of those places where when you're getting assignments at School Motion, a lot of times they can look and feel the same as everyone else. But if someone is interested enough to follow you or to look at you, this is the place to really start putting your voice and your vision as a designer. Like I get a really good sense of the 2 or 3 kinds of jobs I can think of right away, right? There isn't like 17 different types of designs. There's like 3 themes in there, right? There's some cool illustrations, there's some type design, and then there's all those patterns. It gives me a really good memory of who this artist is if I need to call on her. So
Totally.
Instagram is a tool. Sometimes Instagram can be your portfolio or your demo reel. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have the full on website.
True.
Anything else you want to say about Kaitlyn before we move on to our next class?
No, I mean, just I think you nailed it. I mean, the only other thing I would say is it's the way that the reason why that works so well is she created a mood, and mood is part of
Mm-hmm.
design as well, making sure that you understand kind of if you're trying to mimic a particular style, the fact that she nailed it so well from the beginning, we can almost overlook a little bit of what you were saying, like the type is so close to the border and the edge. And yes, those are things that nowadays, if we print or if we do video, it may not work. But because it's like listening to Weird Al Yankovic, like the moment that you know you're going to listen to him, like your mind goes to that place, right? You know, it's going to be quirky and it's going to be weird and it's going to be, you're not like, oh, he's using an accordion or, you know, he's saying weird things. Your mind's already like, oh, I know what I'm
Yeah.
listening to. And this to me, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of like, it was convincing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of paying attention, which design, the last thing I would say is design is a lot about paying attention to the choices that you're making. If you're just randomly putting things together, most of the time, you know, you might get lucky and strike gold just because you got lucky, but it's not going to happen consistently. So pay attention to the basic rules, your colors and all those things, because when you do that, you're going to get a better result. So
Yeah,
just
we'll talk about this more when we get to design boot camp, but that is
yeah.
kind of the hidden trick to getting better and faster at everything is design. It almost is because design's not just the final concept, it's also a method for thinking and a method for approaching how to solve the problem that you get handed as an artist working for a client. But we'll get more into that. Design bootcamp is a really good place to talk about that.
Cool.
Up next, let's talk about illustration for motion. And I love this class. Like, again, we said that it's not necessarily something that people think of immediately as a design class. Think of it as a drawing class or it's an elective of an elective, but it really is a core expression of a lot of the stuff that you learn in PSI Unleashed and in Design Kickstart. Tell me a little bit about the person we're going to be talking about. Tell me a little bit about Marcus Odom, who he's taken a bunch of classes there. Path to MoGraph, Animation Bootcamp, Level Up. Thank you. Illustration for Motion was one of them that he took as well. But what caught your eye about Marcus's work and his experience in illustration for motion?
Yeah, no, Marcus's final assignment just blew me away in the sense of he really put a lot of, you're going to see it now when I talk about it, but you can, if you see that work, it almost encapsulates everything that is being taught in the class, from the use of color, from the use of contrast, the use of perspective, forced perspective,
Hmm.
exaggeration. I mean, it's all in there. Texturing, illustration for motion is probably, from the classes that I've TA'd, it's probably one of the hardest, in the sense that it'll kick your butt really hard. But the
Hmm.
great thing about it is that it's all based on, like, every single assignment feels like a legit real client project. Like, I see the assignments and I'm like, yep, I've had a project like that. Yep, I've had a project like that. It all feels like, if you take this class and you make it through, you're going to be ready for, yes, become a better illustrator, but overall you're going to be able to understand what a pitch is, how to work with, revisions, how to think critically about the choices you're making in terms of your characters and all that kind of stuff. So it really is a design class at heart, but you're going to get to learn from Sarah some amazing techniques on illustration, texturing, how to, like, go out of your comfort zone and, like, do exaggerated stuff that you feel like, I don't know if I can do that. It's like, yeah, try it. Just, exaggerate the head or make it small, and you start to see, like, oh wow, it is neat. It is cool. It is a contrast tool that I can use. So yeah, a lot of neat things in there. I can talk about it all day. I love that class.
I know. I love that class, and I 100% co-sign everything you're saying. I think the other thing that's really cool about a lot of the classes we have at School of Motion that are something for motion is that you can take a lot of different drawing and illustration classes. There are a lot of really good ones. There's sites, there's schools that do it. There are very few schools that teach you illustration specifically for motion design. So part of that is on the technical side. How do you design and prep for something that an animator can use? Sarah goes over that.
Mm-hmm.
The other big thing, though, is like, how can you take whatever style that you have that you are starting to cultivate and take all of your inspirations, whether it's photography or it's film and TV or it's cartoon character animation from, feature films from the 80s. Sarah has an amazing ability to turn that into a very commercial sensibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are house styles out there. There are expectations for what a character should and shouldn't look like in motion design right now, for better or for worse. Sarah is really great at showing you those techniques that you see all the time, but also allowing your own personal style, your own personal interests, your own personal kind of obsessions with illustration to find a way in. And I think that is like the secret about that class, is that it's not about illustrating, it's not about motion, it's about how to do all those things together and
Yep.
also be employable, right? Like, to be able to work in the trend, but also understand how to subjugate the trend into your kind of vision as well. So I love that. Let's dive into the actual critique, because there's a lot in this one.
Yep.
Marcus is a workhorse. Like, he puts the time in, and you can see it in this critique. So let's go ahead and roll that now.
Let's do it. Hi everyone, Frank Suarez here, and today we're taking a look at Markas Odom's final assignment for illustration for motion. It is called Gone Camping, and this is just really a fantastic case study for great design and for putting all the tips and tricks that we learned in illustration for motion into the final assignment. So I want to dive right in. I want to kind of break it down because he has a lot that he turned in for this final assignment, and we're going to be able to kind of peel back the curtain and see why his final assignment is working so well. The boards are actually broken down into some very rough sketches at first. Then he has a color blocking stage. Then he does a more refined kind of value study of what his value system is going to be. And then he finally has the final renders of the illustration. So there's a lot of principles here from the class. There's also some principles that you learn in Design Kickstart and Design Bootcamp. So let's dive right in. First off, we see these very rough boards. And what's really great here is, even though we have a lot of loose lines and we have a lot of loose drawings, we can already start to see the energy that we're going to have on the shots. At this point, you're thinking about contrast, you're thinking about figure-ground relationship, which is basically the relationship between your foreground objects and your background objects. You're thinking about things like energy lines, perspective, and all those kind of things. And that's what you're trying to block out in this very rough stage. Right away, we start to see, this idea of this element in the foreground and then elements in the background. And just with scale, we're able to see, that difference in scale is helping us to see, okay, so this object is going to be further back, and this object is going to be even further back. And then this object is going to be right in front of camera. So just by establishing scale, we can see a hierarchy here. For example, here we have this idea of force perspective with this kind of big shoe coming at us and then quickly receding into the scene. So we can already start to see some ideas of, where our perspective lines are going to be. Our camera is going to be a little bit off kilter. And all this is already starting to set the mood for this energetic, kind of powerful, sports-like adventure scenes that we're getting here. Same thing here. Look at the perspective lines, kind of this one-point perspective, but instead of being all linear, we're getting this idea of, curves. We're getting this idea of dynamic characters with poses. So all of this just from some rough lines. Really, really fantastic. Same thing here, figure-ground relationship. We have this very strong character in the foreground, and then we have our background that is receding. And if you notice, maybe here with some rule of thirds, very roughly laid out, we have our character on that main axis. And then we have kind of our perspective leading into, this point right here. So just very nice use of design, very basic principles, but they're working very well. Same thing here. We have our character in the main part, and then we have kind of our receding lines here into this main point. So just from these rough outlines, we can already start to see that these very basic principles are going to be what's guiding the rest of the design. The next thing that he did was the color blocking. And again, this is really, really fantastic to be able to see this process, because this is already kind of getting a bit more detail in terms of the illustration. We're starting to see the main shapes of our characters. We're starting to see the main kind of idea for our scenes. And this idea of using color as a way to tell the story and as a way to see which colors work well with each other. So when you're doing color blocking, all you're doing is you're trying to see, okay, how are my colors working with each other, right? So we have complementary colors here with orange and blue, and then we have also the green for the trees, but the greens have two tones where we're going to be able to set a darker tone maybe for expressing shadows, and then a lighter tone to be able to express that we're closer to camera. So we're using color also as a perspective tool. We're using color to help guide the eye to see the hierarchy of where our scene is. Again, really nice use of forced perspective here, where we see this, very quirky shot with a shoe very close to camera. And then look, this character is smaller than the shoe, but then look how quickly it recedes into the background. So this is already going to establish our eyes in this, first part, and then there's communication with this other part. But everything else is leading our eye. You see how it leads our eye towards this, main part of the scene. So very well thought out. We can also see it here with this very forced perspective. Look at this hand, how big it is, but then how quickly it recedes into the background. Again, with this calf, just up in your face. And then, the use of that forced perspective, which is something that we talk about in the class, and is being used here as a contrast tool, right? Because we're contrasting the idea of this foreground with the background. We can also see this great design idea of a triangle, which is something that is a very strong compositional use. And here our main character is kind of in this 3-point perspective. So it feels like he's gigantic and enormous. And so it's giving him a sense of scale. It's giving him a sense of being a powerful, mighty figure within our shot. So another thing that Markas did is this value study. And this is also very, very neat, because a lot of times you may work out your colors, you may work out your scene, but in this part of the study of him putting together his illustration, he's really trying to figure out how is value going to work within my scene to be able to tell a story, right? So, for example, we see things like hints at texture. So this is going to get some value maybe through texturing of lines. Over here, we're going to have a value system where we have kind of lighter objects in my scene are going to be lighter, and then as they recede, they will start to have a value system that goes down. So all these ideas of using value to be able to lead the eye and have a well-balanced composition. This idea also of contrast can be seen not only through color, but also through shape. So we have this obviously enormous shape here of a character, and he is being contrasted against, these other shapes which are also big, but because this character is in our background, we're going to interpret that as this being a giant or this being a huge figure. So this display on contrast with characters and with shape is something that we learn in class as well, being able to use shapes and force perspective to kind of have a more dramatic design and be able to draw the eye of the viewer. So these are beautiful just as they are. I mean, great use of line, repetition, pattern, really, really nicely done. And still very rough at this stage, but really hinting at, some of that character design. Just really great, powerful poses. Really great to be able to get a behind the scenes look at all this fantastic work. Just go through these. Just beautiful work. And then here finally we have the rendered final designs. And you can see how everything comes together, from the color blocking, from really setting your scene with the perspective, to the colors, to the textures. Everything is coming together to work as a cohesive design. And this is something that a lot of students may not get right away. It's the sense that, you see a design like this and you think, wow, it just came together all of a sudden out of nowhere. But really it's about applying the principles of design, and then also being able to go through the process of understanding color, understanding value, understanding perspective, understanding contrast, so that at the end you end up with something that is compelling, that is really powerful in terms of design and communicates well to your viewer. So great job, Marcus, on this. This really turned out fantastic. The character design is beautiful. Your perspective work is beautiful. The color choices are working very well together. You have this quirky, fun, energetic design that is really communicating well. And overall, these are just beautiful to look at, honestly. This is one of my favorite shots. Just really great communication here. There's this triangular design where, your eye is kind of bouncing around, looking at this character, balancing this character, and then looking at the eyes of the counselor being, surprised by all the energy that is going on. Really, really beautiful work. And then this off-kilter design is just fantastic as well, to convey energy and, really conveying a lot of kind of a three-point perspective from the camera looking up. It's really well done. I can almost see this being cell animated. We have principles of animation here already being hinted at with, some squash and stretch here with these dodgeballs. Just, look at the energy in this shot with this very forced perspective coming in right up to the camera. So cool. Love this shot as well. Just the energy in the face, the energy in that axe. The counselor kind of being in shadow there by the other character, and just this kind of duel going on here. Again, it's just this idea of leading the eye. If we were to just draw some lines in here, this is not by coincidence. This is not by chance. We have, our design kind of leading us. You see that? Everything's kind of leading up to this main area of action with the character. We can also draw some rule of thirds here, and we can see that Marcus also, very basic principle of design, just to use your rule of thirds. A lot of photographers use it, and it's, a very simple tool. But, you can just see that the main action is right here, and that's drawing our eye right into that character. Really, really well done. And then our lockup screen. This is just really beautiful work, and if I'm finding nothing wrong with it, definitely there's things that we can analyze. If this was a client project, did it hit the mark? Was it on budget? This is basically really, really great job, all the way from the initial designs to our color blocking techniques, to then doing a value study to making sure that we have good value for the piece, and then also incorporating all those tricks with force perspective and really exaggerated proportions to be able to create contrast and create interest between your foreground and your background elements. So great job on this, Marcus. You really knocked this out of the park. Congratulations on finishing the course.
Oh man. So yeah, we're just gonna do this a lot during this whole thing, but
I'm not worthy.
yeah, sometimes it's amazing to watch these because if you're a creative director or an art director, knowing you have to speak to a client, you want to be able to have, like, one of your jobs as a designer or an animator is to be constantly feeding your team things to keep the client happy, to keep them moving forward, to keep the positive momentum. And the steps were so clear that, even at that very early sketchy stage, even before color block, like it's very easy to read, like, okay, this is the arc of the narrative, this is the arc of the story, these are the places we're going to go, these are the rivalries, these are the points of tension. And then as you get to each stage, Marcus is probably doing it because he needs to, like, limit the amount of variables, right? It's very difficult to think about value and layout and composition and eye flow and color and texture all at once. It's very difficult to do that. So breaking them down almost like a scientist into their, like, core components and then building on top of each other, not only is that smart as a designer, it also gives, you become the art director and creative director's best friend when you can do that, right? Because it makes it for a much easier discussion versus kind of slapping like different elements at different times, or I've got everything finished on one image, right? Like you could have just that Camp Yowzer final image, and that could have been all the time he spent, or he could have fleshed out the entire story. So that's just another great thing. I think illustration for motion, in a lot of ways, is actually storytelling for motion. Like, I think there's almost like a major title and then a minor title for most of the School of Motion courses, and you don't know it until after you've taken it, but you actually find out a lot of times in these classes, like, there's a lot of storytelling, that how to draw an eye to a different spot on a scene, how to handle editing, how to move. I think when really good writers write, you can hear the lyricism, you can hear the music, you can start to hear the score as you start to listen to it, right? Like, you start to get a sense of tone that way.
Totally.
When really good designers start storyboarding, you can feel the pacing and you can feel the movement, right? And I think that that's one of the best compliments you can give to Markham, is that this thing is just, it's dying to be animated, but I think almost everyone watching this already knows how it's going to move from however many, 7, 8 simple frames. The arc of the story, but you also kind of even get a sense of, like, what this is going to do. And again, like, it's a standing ovation for being able to manage all those different things, at once in your head. So
Totally. No, I can totally see this being a spot for like Buck or something like that.
yeah.
And there's something interesting that happens in this class, if I can just share it quickly, is in illustration for motion, the progression to get to characters, it ramps up. So at the very beginning of the course, most of the assignments are just working with basic shapes, working with limited color palettes. And when I say limited, I mean like 2 colors, no characters. And there's this interesting tension that happens because a lot of students want to use more colors. They want to start using character. And of course they can, this is an experimentation. So you can do the assignment in any way that you want to stretch yourself. But the interesting thing is that those students that in many ways start to use character and they realize how hard it is at the beginning without having all these tools. I mean, when you see the character work at the end, you see this, like, it's not like linear. It's like, whoop, there's this progression of like, oh my gosh, that went from like, I would not show this to a client to, I want to show this to a client. And even in Marcus's work. So, if you go back a few assignments, you see that his work is starting to get better and better. His use of texture, his use of perspective, his use of color. It was good at the first assignments, but it just, this final assignment is just like, okay, dude, you're ready for prime time if you want to get an assignment for, a big client. So that's the power of just like 12 weeks of you putting in the time and doing all the homework. It's not like, okay, maybe in 3 years I can get there. It's like, you might be ready by the end.
Yeah.
if you really put in the time and do the assignment.
But
So
that's goes back to that thing we talked about, is that there's a lot of different ways to take these courses, but
yep,
when you're putting the time, it's not just putting the time in, but it's putting the time in being an active participant in the community, being an active participant with your TA, not just submitting something and saying thanks afterwards, but like reworking it. Really like we said, you can turn 10,000 drawings into 1,000 drawings with the right people, the right pressure, and the right attention to like the feedback you're getting. One time we have to do one of these showcases where we just spend the entire hour with one person from the beginning to the end
yeah,
of the course and just chart, like, where was the moment where you found the confidence? Where was the moment where you had the light bulb over your head? Because some courses it happens at the same place every time, right? Like I can say in Design Kickstart, there's a very specific moment where Mike Frederick pulls up these really beautiful style frames, right? Like a pitch for a title sequence for a contemporary TV show. And it's
yep,
got 3D and it's got particles and there's like extreme depth of field and all these big things. And then he turns all of it off and he shows the first thing he did in about 10 minutes. And it's literally black and white, type, and shapes. And the shapes are literally like, they're not complicated. They're not like vector shapes pulled from like a repository. They're literally like squares, circles, triangles, and it's how he works with overlapping, how he works with figure ground relationships, and how he tells a story and implies camera movement and scale, and like you said, mood and tone, with just these simple things, right?
yep.
And then he just puts all of them back on, and everyone in that class has a moment where it's like, now I know why design is important. But you have to get to that. You have to get 3 weeks into it to really have that moment. So I think it'd be awesome to be able to chart someone's like journey and just have them on live and talk like, okay, well, like, how was this assignment? Was it tough? Like, where did you fall apart? Where did you need your TA? Where did you just give up? Where did you take off? Because I think it's some people it's very different, but it is fun looking at Marcus's his path. I think Marcus is on the chat as well. Shout out to Marcus. And I didn't know this. I was looking at your LinkedIn. It sounds like you're repping Chicago. So that's awesome. It's good to have another Chicago person around School of Motion. We're going to skip Design Kickstart as a class. I had to get that little bit in there because it is, if you've been listening to us and wondering a lot of the things that you're hearing from Frank talk about, like he's talking about leading lines, he's talking about convergence, he's talking about tangents, contrast is one of the biggest things, but there's so many flavors of contrast, right? Like contrast has like 8 different render engines that you could be using if they were a tool, right? Like you can be talking about value, you can be talking spatial contrast, you can be
Yep.
talking soft versus, versus hard, curves versus straights. There's almost an endless amount of it, but almost always when you find an image that is just like haunting or arresting or you can't stop thinking about it, most of the time it's because there's 3 or 4 elements of just contrast at play. If you want to learn more of those things and they don't necessarily make sense to you while we're talking about it, but they're interesting, Design Kickstart is the place to be for that. Mike will get that into your head and he will exercise it into your arms and your hands and your brain, that there are probably 8 to 10 fundamentals that you got to do a lot of it, but once you know it forever, and then you'll be ready for our next class for Design Boot Camp.
Totally. And I'm just gonna say this. It's gonna sound cheesy, but I've been designing for a while, and I went through Mike's class, and I literally felt like I was being plugged into the Matrix. Like now I know Kung Fu. It's like these principles that I was using, but I didn't know why they worked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, oh, now it makes sense. There's like a science behind it, or there's a reason behind
Mm-hmm.
why these things work. Instead of me just like kind of, yeah, it looks cool over here. Let me try it over there. Let me just kind of guess.
Yeah.
So totally recommend that class.
Well, that Design Boot Camp is the class that I tell this story a lot, that like when I started working at big studios, I was very much like an intuitive designer. I didn't know what I was doing and I could
Mm.
occasionally fall into a decent frame, but when you're working on the floor with a bunch of other designers, you walk past them and you're like, I would get in early. I'd get in at like 8:30, and in LA, that's a big deal. Like people come in at 10:30, and I would be just like scrambling like mad. I would actually have to have a seat where nobody could see my screen because I was so like imposter syndrome, psyching myself out. And I would just be doing anything I could to fill up a blank page based off of, the assignment, whatever the client wants. And I would struggle and struggle and struggle. And by like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I might have a frame, maybe
Mm.
2, like a frame and like a sketch of an idea, but not like a full like concept, not 4 or 5 frames that are telling the story like what Marcus showed.
Mm.
And I always was sitting next to, like, across from this guy who'd show up at 11, he'd have his coffee. Around 12:30, 1 o'clock, he'd go get lunch. He'd be gone for an hour and a half. And at the same time, I'm sitting there sweating bullets because at the end of the day, I got to give these to my creative director to put them into a deck. He's already got 2 full sets of 4 boards. And I'm like, what, like, were you working on these? You had to be working these at home. You must have gotten the assignment early. Like, what's going on, right? And he's about the same age as me. a lot more experience in a studio like that. And he's like, man, he's like, it's easy, man. It's just design. He's like, that's all it is. He's like, he's like, he already sees what he wants to do before he goes into Photoshop, because he understands and he has the muscle memory of being like, okay, well, you know what? I've done this before where I need to make something feel imposing. So I have, like something white in the background, and I have two black things in the foreground, and then something white again. And he's doing just like stacking of shapes. And then he reverses those both in order and the shape and the value contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, it doesn't even have to look final, but he can go and be like, to the creative director at 3:00 and be like, is there anything you want me to change? And like, it's much more easy to art direct somebody when they're still working with just the fundamentals versus when they put what Mike likes to call the jazz hands or the glitter. Like when all you do is just put a lot of glitter on things. If somebody says, hey, you know what, can you flip the foreground contrast? Can you
you're
make
so attached by that point.
Well, and it's so hard to go backwards, right? Like you spent 90% of your time putting the paint on, but you didn't build like the structure of the house. So you're almost like, cool, I can do that. I need another day because I have to start over. I'm not just moving things. And then like, so that was really the key to me. That's like, it's one thing to hear the names of the terms design. It's another thing to intimately know them and have executed them, so you can pull them up the same way people know like all the settings for redshift to get, each, like people know subsurface scattering, and they know how to get caustics, and they know how to do like all these different things. Design is exactly the same way to these people that honestly, every shop you love has 3 or 4 of these people that you will never hear their names. They're 10 times better than Ash Thorpe. They're not interested in celebrity, but they are lightning fast. They're incredibly creative, and they are just design wizards.
Yep.
You just never hear about them. But someone we did hear about is Gina Taylor, who's going to be with us in a little bit. Gina has taken, I don't know how many, but it looks like illustration for motion, animation bootcamp, level up, design bootcamp, expression session, CAB, advanced motion methods. Are there any classes left that she hasn't taken? Demo Dash. I think that's it. Tell me a little bit about Gina, and I can tell you why I really wanted to talk to her for a specific assignment when we were looking through this. But tell me just a little bit about what you know about Gina and her background.
Yeah, totally. Well, Gina was my student in advanced motion methods, and I believe it was the last session or the session before that. Can't remember right now, but there are certain students that when you start to see their work, there's just something about the way that they're doing things that, just kind of stand out, whether it be their, I remember early on, she redesigned part of an assignment, and I was like, whoa, not only did you redesign it, but it looks really cohesive with the artwork, which is something that other people have tried to do, and they don't get it right. So they get the design wrong, and then the animation doesn't work. But her design was like spot on. Her animation was great. And I was like, oh, Gina's someone to keep an eye on just, as I progress through class. And of course, I look forward to all assignments from all students. But there's, I'm kind of thinking like, I want to see what Gina does next. And hint out there, your TAs are kind of looking for that, because we also get excited to see people like progress and do work. We get excited about everyone. We also have students that are just starting out, and we have to spend a little bit more time on that. We love doing that as well. But it's exciting to see someone like Gina just kind of like you're looking forward. Did she submit something? I have something for Gina today.
Well, this is something that happens at every school too. Like this is important for people to know that like there are always those moments where and school emotion is just like everyone else. We have a Slack, and when somebody does something that shocks someone or is new, or they're even trying to do something a little out of the ordinary or crazy and kind of announce it, eyes are on you at that point for some reason. Be like all of a sudden there'll be something in one of our Slack where people are like, well, this person's trying to redesign all of the AMM final project. It's hard enough to just get it done. What are they doing? And it's almost like people line up to be like, okay, let's, do you think they're going to actually get it done? Like you would be surprised to know how much behind the scenes there is a lot of discussion and churn, and people will try to like guess what's going to happen. So it's kind of a tip. If you want to get the attention of people, maybe try redesigning something, but also know like at the same time, you're putting yourself on a tightrope that it's going to be difficult. But
public service announcement.
Yeah, several times Gina has pulled the trick of doing the higher wire act and making it to the other side, but also kind of like doing some flips and gymnastics along the way to really like impress everybody. One of those that we wanted to talk about was what you critiqued, I believe, was the Mission to Mars assignment from Design Bootcamp. Maybe we should run it and then I'll talk. I specifically saw this piece, and was like, whoever it is that made these decisions, that did this, we have to like get them on the show. So let's run the Mission to Mars Design Bootcamp critique.
Do it. Hi everyone, Frank Suarez here. Today we're going to be reviewing Gina's Expedition 100 Mission to Mars boards. What we're trying to accomplish in this assignment is creating a couple of style frames that we can use for a project called Mission to Mars. And essentially what we need to do is just be able to pull references and then kind of use those references as a guide for us to be able to show a potential client what our style is going to be. So this is what this assignment is about. So we're going to take a look at the two options that Gina has presented. And then we're also going to dive a little bit into the Photoshop file because there are some neat things that I want to kind of look at in there as well. So this is our first board, and we have two style frames that Gina has put together for us. Kind of the first treatment idea for the style frames. And as you can see here, we have some references that Gina pulled together, which are really cool. We see this idea of like a little bit of double exposure. We see this idea of using a lot of negative space with minimalist type. We see some ideas of using blocks or simple shapes to outline certain parts of our design. We see kind of the idea of using type to kind of cut through the images. So a lot of really great references here for a particular mood that you want to show to your client. We also have something really cool right here as well, and that is that she gave us a sense of a few terms that we can think about as we're looking at these boards. And this is something neat that you can show to a client. If a client is not really sure of your direction, you know, these words here really help to kind of solidify the concept more. So we're talking about a desolate place, very technical, you know, very vast area, rugged. So all these terms are kind of helping us come up with an idea, a mood, or a concept that we can also pitch to the client. So these are the two style frames for this particular treatment. And as you can see, they're working really nicely. And the cool thing is, Gina actually came to this idea through experimenting in another assignment. And it was through a kind of a happy little accident of turning on a kind of a gradient layer on top of everything. And then she saw that everything kind of had this cool contrast idea to it, and kind of ran with it and said, you know, this could be useful in another opportunity. So this is the cool thing about experimenting and trying things out, is that sometimes you're going to find that a mistake can lead to an actual idea that can work later on in another project or in the project that you're working on. So I'm just going to do some very basic lines here just so we get an idea for like rule of thirds. But it's basically you divide up your frame into kind of 3 segments vertically, 3 segments horizontally. And then wherever you have these corners where they meet, this is kind of like the axis that you want to align a lot of your design to. And you will find that your design will be a lot more interesting or balanced instead of lining everything up to the center. So here, for example, we can see that our text is near this corner. We can see that a lot of our negative space is in this area here of interest, but we have, just kind of this element here kind of poking our eye and making us look this way. We also have this low contrast black and white image with this pop of color that is helping it to just stand out. And obviously there's a play on words here because, the word cold, but then we have a warm color. So there's an interesting use of contrast in terms of meaning of word and color. So that's another way to add contrast to your image. And here as well, we can see, if I just kind of do some rough, these are just very rough. They're not perfect, but just so we get the idea, we can see that our element is right here, very near that point where they meet, and our text is kind of nicely sitting on that line. So we'll get to this frame in a little bit. There's some really cool things going on there, but overall, these look really, really nice. And I think it goes well with the themes that you've chosen here. So let's take a look at the second option. Really cool as well. Now on this one, we're missing a second style frame. Usually when you want to show style frames to your client, you want to make sure that you at least have 2, just so that they see what the continuity is going to be throughout the shots. You have to do a style frame for every single scene, but 2 is kind of the minimum that you need so a client can understand the mood or a theme that you're trying to establish. Let's say, for example, you want to establish these lines as a theme, then you definitely want to make sure that you have another frame so you can reference it and the client can understand that there's an idea being used and repeated. So again, really cool idea, just giving us some words here: oppressive, unknown, hostile, dramatic, and definitely all of that is being conveyed here in the design. The references are fantastic. I mean, this reference right here, I think is really the one that's probably the one that's leading the most in terms of use. For example, we see obviously the great use of mainly 2 tones, the yellow and the red. This idea of kind of glow from this light source, and we have that kind of being presented here as well. Very cool. Again, just to keep repeating the point, this idea of some basic rule of thirds. It's helping to really get the design to be balanced, to be pleasing. So that's working really well. So let's actually open up the file for a second, because there are some things in here that I want to just point to that make a difference when you're putting together some style frames or when you're designing, that we can pay attention to. And I want to look at this frame as an example, particularly when it comes to our image, because if we look at the original image, I'm just going to turn off the filters. This is what the original image looked like. And obviously is very different, and it does not work together as well in the design when we see it this way. But because of the treatment that we have on it, we can now see that the levels adjustment is really helping to bring those shadows up so that we have a lower contrast design on our image. And that lower contrast design is working with the rest of the design. But then also, the saturation, just bringing it down a little bit. I would have potentially moved them just a tiny bit more this way, just because it feels like it's so close to the screen. So maybe, just bring it ever so slightly over. And then with that, also bring our text just slightly over to have more breathing room. So, these are just minor adjustments. Again, these are just to kind of show your client potentially what the mood of the piece is going to be. So for this, they work really, really great. I think that you've managed to put together 2 strong concepts, and great job with these boards.
Again, those are great.
Awesome work.
I want to get Gina on as soon as we can, but I just have to say that I took Mission to Mars, or I took the Design Bootcamp class. I did the Mission to Mars assignment. I've stared at everybody's assignments for like every semester, every session that they come out. It is so rare that someone makes the simple, basic design decision to do warm text over a white void. Like, it just literally, like, for some reason, everyone just doesn't have the intuitiveness or the courage or the insight to go that way. And it's amazing how much, like, that simple decision allowed Gina to just grab your attention. But then the 3 or 4 examples that she chose were really interesting, especially for the white one, that there's, I think, only one image out of them that even has anything to do with science or outer space or anything. Like, it's so refreshing to see design references that aren't literally just spitting back what the subject matter or what previous explorations of the subject matter have done, right? Like, that was like, you can feel immediately when you look at those 2 couple of images that there's someone with a thought process here, right there. And then as soon as you start adding that type, even if those words aren't reflected in the final image, it's really interesting when you're putting a pitch together, when you're putting a deck together. Whatever you choose to show the most of, it almost becomes noise if you choose to show one other thing once, right? So there are, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 images on there, but the fact that there's just 4 words grouped together, those individual words carry so much more weight with the concept when someone is just handed the page and they have to do the thinking for themselves before you get to talk or explain it, that, like, it's very powerful of a decision to just drop those 4 things in. And I don't think that those words, especially in the second one, are necessarily like a one-to-one connection to what that one single image is, but it colors it so dramatically, so much more than all the rest of the style frames, all the rest of the mood boards, just by choosing that. I think it was a really, I don't think it's part of the assignment to do that, but I think it's a really interesting tactic to take, especially if you're only going to throw one board. Like, that's probably, we probably should bring Gina on, because I feel like that's in some ways you can do that in a job, and it's a mic drop moment if it works. And if it's not, you basically get the finger pointed. You're like, you really thought you could do one board? So Gina, tell us a little bit about why
Yeah.
was it time? Did you just believe in the idea so much, or where did you come up with just doing? It's a good board, and the examples around it really explain where the rest of the boards could go. But do you just think that was the best board and you didn't need to do anymore?
I really wish I could say that was the case. It was honestly just that I'm going to be honest and say I had such a hard time with that assignment. It really felt like I was banging my head against the wall trying to come up with something, especially once I'd got like that white concept done and I was like, okay, you know, this has turned out quite good. I'm happy with it. And then you have to come up with a whole nother concept. And it's like, I've already just like poured my heart and soul into this. And I've only just managed to scrape by. And now I have to do it all again. And so I just managed to do that one frame. And by that time, like, you know, the next lesson was out and we were on to the next assignment. And I just thought, I can't bring myself to do it. So yeah, I'd love to say that it was intentional, but it wasn't.
Well, and I still think it works really good. We have it up on the stream now, just so for people can take a look at it. It's a great frame. I mean, I love again, they're references that that you've seen before, but when you see them in context with each other, plus the type together, it feels totally different. I almost wish it could even be pushed even more. Like, I love that yellow column of light. It just draws your eye directly towards this like small person that sets the scale for this desolate kind of very dramatic image. But even just the little things you did, like where you were cutting out the background and scaling and offsetting it, it's such a small little subtle thing, but the same thing we were talking about with Marcus, where when you see Marcus's boards, you can tell what's going to happen. I already get a sense from looking at this, like how this could animate, how it could move. And that's a rare thing to be able to say with one frame, right? Normally you at least need 2 frames to understand motion, to understand movement, to understand like the feeling of how it's going to animate, but you're able to do it with 1 frame. So congratulations for you doing that.
It's funny that you mentioned about that one reference as well with the kind of like the shaft of light. I don't know what it's from. I'm guessing like it's from a film or something, but yeah, for that one, that was actually the only reference I had from the start, and I really struggled to find like the other 2 to go with it. I would have wanted a couple more, but I was like, this kind of sums up how I want it to feel so well. And like with the including the words, I'm a very kind of like word-based thinker. So anytime I start a project, it's all lists. I buy notebooks without lines so that I could draw, and then I end up just writing in them.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so like I had that one reference and I had like the words, so I knew in my head kind of what I was going for. And it's just kind of, you know, spending the time trawling through Pinterest or whatever, trying to get enough that you could communicate that to someone else.
Yeah, I think if I could say that one thing that is so powerful about the way they put the boards together is those words. They really do help as someone that's just seeing this for the first time, particularly a client, right? We know that most of the time style frames don't end up being what ends up, you know, going in the final piece, because style frames are just kind of to set the mood and to really help the client see, you know, it may end up going in slightly into a different direction, but you've made those words kind of like their own frame, because those words encapsulate what the mood is, right? And so if I see the image without the words, I can start making my own ideas. But the fact that you've kind of implanted that little seed in my head, I'm seeing the image with those words. And so I think it's a clever use. I mean, it's risky because, you know, the client might be like, well, this is exactly what I don't want. It's like, oh, great. Well, now we know.
We can pick some new words.
Exactly.
There's loads of them.
We'll just, you know, go and find the synonyms and we'll just replace them. But, you know, that was cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the first frame? Because I know Daniel Schreiber was your TA, and you mentioned to him like, this was just kind of like a happy little accident that I was on another assignment. I put in a gradient by mistake and I was like, holy smokes, this looks awesome. And then you kept that little mistake for later on. Can you tell us a little bit of that story?
Yeah, I can. Just one thing quickly first, though. Huge shout out to Daniel, because he was absolutely fantastic. He's a brilliant TA. Every critique was like detailed and thoughtful, and like, you know, we'd go back and forth and it was like collaborative, and he was excellent. So yeah, just shout out to Daniel. But yeah, with that, the kind of white gray style for that, it was on the the assignment before the mission to Mars is the one called Tokyo Throwdown, where it's kind of like about a dance show, and you get these kind of like, it's very kind of like, I don't know, early 2000s kind of style is the way that it's kind of pitched. And I was just using a gradient map on something, and I accidentally applied it gray instead of pink. And I was like, oh, hey, that looks pretty cool. Anyway, I guess I'll just carry on. And then it wasn't until next week I was like, oh man, that thing I accidentally did because I messed up my keyboard shortcuts. That could actually be really useful here.
That's so fun. Paying attention, just you're paying attention to the process, and everything kind of has a meaning. So I like that you used a mistake as a part of your next idea in your toolkit. So
I would say that's one of the most fun things about design is that pretty much any experience you have in your life, anything you see, anywhere you go, you can draw that in and use it in your work. It's like in one of the other assignments, the diesel one, like the week before, I'd just been like mindlessly scrolling on the internet or something, and I saw a photo of it was a set list like that someone had picked up at a Nirvana concert, and they'd framed it, and it was just like this crumpled bit of paper with like some scribbles on. And I was like, oh man, that person paid that much for it. Anyway, whatever. And then the next week we were doing the diesel boards, and I was like, oh, hey, you like a set list, because the diesel assignment, for people who don't know, is it's like a festival or a concert or something where you have to show these 3 artists performing and kind of get that across in your boards. And just because I'd seen that the week before, I was like, oh, that could be an interesting idea. So it's a great excuse to like be able to do what you want and play video games and read books and do whatever. It's research for my work. So yeah, that's what I love.
I think that's one of the biggest things about both Bootcamp and Kickstart and for the design is that they just open your eyes to like how you experience the world. Like you do become kind of like a sponge or like a collectionist or like a completist, or you're like, I gotta take 2 more pictures. Like people start walking away from you very quickly while you're just like hanging out in a place like staring at the ground. Or I find myself Adobe has a really great app for color palettes, and like if I'd go shopping with my wife, I ended up staying in the place longer than she would because I'm like, no, I gotta get this. I gotta get these 3 colors. I don't know what they are. I gotta get, just like, let me get them. And it's it can become a hindrance with a lot of people that you're hanging out with, but it does open your eyes into like, oh man, I've been missing out on so many things, like so many things that can imply story or can imply tone or theme, like Frank's been saying earlier. We got a question from someone because I think we talked about how many classes you've taken. I'm hoping it's gonna be a design one, but what's your favorite class that you've had at School of Motion? Out of how many have you taken?
I think 6, maybe 7, including Level Up.
Yeah, that is a lot of classes.
Yeah. Oh boy. But yeah, my favorite is actually a funny answer in that I would say I've got a joint favorite, and the 2 classes couldn't be more different. So I would say that it's joint between Illustration for Motion, which is the first one I took, and Expression Session, which I absolutely love. Like it was so much fun. Like it was completely new to me. But like the way that it kind of builds up, it was perfect. It was like completely opposite experience from Illustration for Motion, which is so full on. But yeah, that's what I think is great about School of Motion, is that, you cover such a broad range of things and they can be so different, but it's all kind of done to that same level.
Did you didn't happen to take them back to back, did you?
Yeah, I did. I took all of them back to back. Yeah. Probably not recommended.
Yeah. So it brings up a question, kind of a good segue is, can you tell us a little bit about like your current path in your career? Because obviously we've seen kind of the power of your design and you're really good at it. But you're saying now Expression Sessions as well. Like what was your path to MoGraph, and what are you doing now, and how are you applying all this to your career? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So at the moment, I'm a freelance designer, illustrator, animator. I like to kind of spell it out rather than just put motion designer, because I feel like such a kind of nebulous term. But I've only been freelance for 3 months. So before that, I was working in-house at a software company here in the UK. So I was just a graphic designer in the marketing department. And honestly, prior to taking Illustration for Motion a year ago, I'd never even really heard of the motion design industry. I didn't really know. I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a lot of creative industries that as like a layperson, it's really not obvious that all those jobs exist, but they do. There are so many of them, and like at so many different companies. And so it was a real eye opener for me. And I think especially taking illustration for motion, Sarah Beth it's really comprehensive in that she covers illustration, yes, but as you were saying, it really is like a design course. But then she also talks about like cinematography and animation. So it's really comprehensive, and I feel like it was a great introduction to the industry, just because she really puts things in context. Like, this is the illustration part, but here's how it fits in with the rest of the process.
So can you just say the number again? You said that how long ago was it that you even discovered just like motion design as a term or an industry? How long ago was that?
So I took illustration for motion in spring 2020. So probably just like a little bit before then.
Okay, wow. Well then what we need to do then is that so people who are watching this, just so you can understand like what taking the course as seriously as Gina has, like we've talked about it, she has redesigned assignments. We give you tons of material to work with so you can focus on the specifics of it, whether it's AMM with animation, but multiple times over, Gina has basically like started from scratch and built it and gotten them done in time. I would love for us to be able to play your reel, knowing that a year and change ago, you started playing in this world. Would that be cool with you, Gina, if we show your reel?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's fire it up and let's show people just so they can see like how far you can go in a short amount of time. I'm not going to do a full-on demo reel dash reel review because there's so much good stuff in there. But I think what I loved about it was that there is a mix of things that seem somewhat familiar, but have a like freshness to them, right? Like that's something that I think is difficult when you're at school motion. If you do 2, 3, 4 classes, like how do you take all this stuff and make it your own? And there's just a nice mix of like this is one of the most diverse reels I feel like that we've seen from somebody who's been at school motion, let alone motion design for a year, right? Like there's stuff like these things that look like they're for product. There's things that look like they're self-motivated. There's stuff that's referencing Harry Potter. There's stuff that looks like it could go, on a commercial right now. But the thing that I think that's like the thing that ties it all together is just the attention to detail and craftsmanship, right? Like if it's animation, things aren't just looking like you threw easy ease on them, right? Like there's even in that one where there's the 6-up of all this stuff that feels like an app, like there's such an attention to just like offsets and like textured timing that you don't get if you're just like, okay, cool, I got to set some keys and I'll hit F9 and I'll just pull them 3 frames apart in each one. Like there's a curiosity that feels like whatever it is you're doing, your illustrations, your designs, even that moment where all the logs drop and it says, oh dear, like there's a hint of personality that should not be in someone's like first reel within a year. So like that's there's a lot of lessons to take from there for like how to approach a short reel that's very nicely dense, but also has a lot of variety. Like that feels like a true like junior generalist reel. I see a lot of people who just say generalist because they're like, I don't know what to do, so here's all the stuff I do. I'm a generalist. Like this feels very different than that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention it actually, because it's something that I've sort of wrestled with myself, is that I really feel like I am a generalist, but then because I'm so kind of early in my career, it's like, well, am I just a junior or am I actually a generalist? So I think that's just one of the things that the longer you do it, you can kind of figure it out. Maybe I'll specialize, maybe I won't, but I'm looking forward to finding out.
Well, I'll say like watching that, I feel like I don't feel like it's junior. Like if you wouldn't have told me like what your background experience was, I would not have put you in the pile of like junior. I would say like a middleweight generalist who has like definite curiosity in illustration, definite curiosity in keyframing. It feels a lot like when I first met Sarah Beth and she was designing, but she would, she was with Tyler and Tyler was animating some of her designs and you could see she was trying to figure out which way. And I think just today I just saw that Sarah Beth is repped as a director at Hornet. And she just released her first piece as a director for Bed Bath & Beyond. So it's funny that I saw that, and then like your reel, it's the first time I've watched it. It has a lot of the same resonance of like someone who's curious and you're pushing yourself, but it's not like you're like, "Oh, I guess I'm a generalist." It feels like I am a generalist. I can't wait to figure out what it's going to be. But if you can express those kinds of things in reels, like where you can feel someone's joy or you can feel someone's curiosity, that does so much more than just being like, that's a really cool, very stylized on trend thing. It's a hard thing to be able to evoke, like your personality in a reel. So I think it's a good job. Very good job.
Yeah,
thank you. I appreciate that.
One thing I would say also is the fact that, I mean, it's a year. That's like such a short amount of time. That's 4 sessions to be able to, you probably already had a good design idea, but to be able to see your work, there's work that's not in that reel that I know, you probably cut a new reel and even get it with newer work that you have on there. The one thing I would say is you have the design part, whereas a lot of people that have been animating for longer than you do not. And so if a studio is hiring and they're saying, can I hire someone that, knows animation very well, but, really does not design, or someone that, it's getting better and better at animation, but really has a strong design background, it's really something that is going to help you because you're going to have that design ability. So just thought I'd say that. And do we have time to show her advanced motion methods redesign? I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I mean,
in there.
But yeah, if I don't know who can, I don't think I have it pulled up, but while we're trying to get to it, Gina, AMM, it's already a very difficult class, right? It's a very heady class. It's a very technical class. You have very intimidating materials to work with. What strikes you that on top of all that, you feel like this is now the time to also rebuild and redesign everything from scratch?
I don't know. I just can't help myself. I'm kind of a maniac like that.
Like, you can just say you didn't like Saunders' designs. That's okay.
Yeah. The thing is, because I've done it before on other sessions, like I redesigned the expression session final piece, the animation bootcamp final piece. Going into it, I knew how much work it would be, and yet like I still just couldn't stop myself. And I think part of it is just because like school of motion courses are a huge commitment. And especially because the first one I took was illustration for motion. Like, everybody gets the same brief, but everyone comes out with such different ideas. And so just, in that 12 weeks that I took that course, I came out with probably like, I mean, you saw them in my reel. There's still like probably 6 IFM pieces in my reel. So I think after that experience with any courses I took next, I was like, well, I would love to have like more real pieces I could use in my portfolio. And so to kind of put in all that effort to tackle the assignments, especially for some of the older classes where they've been running for such a long time, that, people are used to kind of seeing the homework that students produce. I was like, well, if I'm going to dedicate all this time anyway, I would love for it to be like something that I can kind of use and keep kicking around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant instinct because I know even as somebody who has had to hire people, you can only see so many ice sculptors or like lightsaber ping pongs before even if the animation is wonderful, it needs some kind of freshness just to like be able to examine that level of skill. I wanted to ask you, because common kind of philosophy, common knowledge of school of motion is that you take a class and then you try to find some breathing room and you take some time off, or you take one of the shorter classes and then you come back for more when you feel like you've absorbed it. You've done the exact opposite. You have taken all of your courses back to back and you've excelled, but you've also like pushed beyond. I feel like there's a certain wall that you can break through, and then the momentum, like the collective momentum of having taken so many of these, does that actually provide more fuel for you to push yourself even more versus, I bet most people would think like, I'd be so exhausted to do 2 in a row or 3 in a row, but somehow you've found a way to flip it and push further.
Partially, I think so. I think in like an ideal situation, if I was to say, right, I'm going to sit down and really kind of like optimize this in the best way, I would take time between the courses just to kind of like, because after every course, you're kind of like buzzing with ideas like, oh, I learned this thing and I could use it in like this, and I'd love to do a personal project using this technique that I learned. And so I think having that time to kind of reinforce the things that you have learned probably is the optimal way of doing it. But for me, like just the situation that I was in, I was kind of like, I'd been working as a graphic designer at this company for 3 years. Prior to that, I was just an admin. But like I was starting to kind of already get a little bit frustrated. I knew that I was going to be moving on at some point. And then the pandemic hit. So I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to leave. So I need to do something. And so I was just taking these courses and kind of like making the most of that situation. And that's the great thing about, being a creative working in-house, is that they will pay for all of it. So they paid for me to take those courses, which is fantastic. Like, I'm so grateful for, everything that I've learned is kind of because of that. So yeah, I would say that you can make it work either way, but if people have time to take the session off and then do one, that it probably is like the more sensible approach.
Well, I mean, on top of all of that, also, doing these classes, doing the work, you're not slow on your Instagram as well. I think if we can pull it over, can you just talk a little bit about like what's your habit? I know some of this stuff I definitely like recognize, but some stuff, I mean, maybe it's stuff that I'm just not familiar with. But what's your attitude towards just like using Instagram as somebody who's trying to level up? Are you trying to post all the time? Are you trying to just use your assignments for it? What's your kind of philosophy? Because I think a lot of people do get caught up in like, oh my gosh, I've got to put something up every week, or I've got to put something up every 2 days. Like, how do you approach it? Because there's a lot of variety. Like, I see some of the home is where the hut is, like that has a strong, brought it up to being like house industries vibe. Like there's something very different from that compared to a lot of the other stuff. So how do you approach Instagram?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say that it's still not something that I have a definitive answer for, in that I think everyone's just kind of finding their feet with all this stuff. It's a tricky one. I used to be really selective about what I would post, and sometimes I still am, in the sense that I would like, one thing I absolutely love is curating work. So like I love making mood boards, or like, stuff like that, just seeing how it all looks in the feed. And I think about like, oh, if I post that one and it's this color, those ones will shift down, and that's how they'll look together. And at a certain point, it just feels like a bit silly. Like, I should just be posting the work, especially like a lot of the times I used to do. So a lot of that older stuff, I used to do loads of calligraphy, loads and loads of it. And I just hardly posted any of it because I was like, oh, this isn't very good. Like, no one wants to see this. I don't want this to be out there. And looking back, I really wish I had posted it. And like, I see that same pattern in myself now, where I make things and I'm like, oh, I don't want to put that on my Instagram, because what if someone sees it? I don't really like it. But I bet in 6 months' time, I'll be like, I should have just posted it. And so I feel like I'm kind of leaning more towards that now. But it is tricky because, I don't know, it feels very kind of like exposing to like, post something. And then if it's not kind of up to, people go on about, you're judged on like your weakest piece of work, so that you kind of always have that in the back of your mind, like, oh, is this bringing everything else down?
Yeah, I know. I bring that up in Dumber Dash all the time, and I hate even saying it out loud, especially when hearing a talented artist say it back, that it's a fear or it's an inhibitor. But it is true that anytime you put a body of work, if the work is good, you tend to, like we're saying, contrast, right? Like even design principles in real life, in terms of like looking at people's work, you go to the thing that you're like, okay, well, if you could set type like this, and if you were so great at calligraphy, and if you have these interesting colors, how did that piece get there, right? Like you at least want to lean in and know the story about like where it came from. So it is that there's some fire underneath that, like the smoke of like, oh man. But I would die to see you do some kinetic type, honestly, like watching the scroll going through and seeing some of the really intricate stuff, or the really nice balance of like calligraphy, like getting hand drawn and calligraphy playing together in a very like unique way, like a very unique voice. We have so little of that animated emotion design now. Like kinetic type used to be a thing, but now it's just like Frank and I were just doing some kinetic type. It's just like, can you pop stuff? Can you make stuff, just keep people's attention for the half a second they're on? But some of this stuff is like, it's dying. Like I love that the not the circus, not my monkeys, like those two fonts playing together. Like we were saying earlier, sometimes you see things and you can already feel the movement. You can feel the movement here. You can see like there's going to be a certain type of action with it, and not just like wiping it on, but like there's there's a nice like mix of like kind of like fun and kind of reservedness in that it'd be fun to see that stuff animate.
Yeah, and I think
that was hand drawn, right?
Yeah, it was all done by hand.
Nice.
And then just like I brought it into Illustrator and kind of pen tooled it up afterwards. But yeah, I think, going back to what we were saying about Instagram, I think for me, it's about having that distinction between my portfolio site and Instagram, and really seeing them as two separate things. Like you can have your portfolio site and have that be like where you keep your professional stuff, that this is how I want clients to see me. But then have the separation of, well, Instagram is where you can maybe be a bit looser with it. And so I think I just need to keep telling myself that, and then I'll post more.
Yeah, it's hard. I think people are starting to try to solve that by having kind of like their like doodles or stuff or junk kind of like on their website, and it's literally just like a link to their Instagram. But it's nice because it automatically starts to just like say who your character, like what your character is and what your interests are besides like what you've been assigned. I mean, I honestly, most of the time when I'm valuing people, I go straight to their like, not the work page, but the like, here's just what I do when I'm screwing around, or this is what I'm kind of interested in, and I don't know if I want to include it in my body of work. Like that is such a bigger insight into like who you're going to end up working with if you hire them. So Frank, do we have any more questions for Gina? I feel like anything more and we're just going to be standing ovation at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we're wrapping up here at the end. Let me scroll through here really quick, see if there was anything else.
If there isn't, then I would love to use the time to ask you guys some questions.
Please,
like,
I was going to ask you.
all the work
I wanted to see if you had any, because it's
Yeah.
a rare opportunity for us to both be on at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually just what you were talking about in terms of, being able to see more of the personality of an artist, particularly because you've done so much hiring before. That section on my site, like below the main projects, where I've just kind of thrown some stuff from my Instagram, and it's some like, bits and pieces, some collage stuff. When you see stuff like that on someone's site, does it kind of put you off? Is it too random? Like it makes me think of, when you see someone who's fresh out of school and they've got like life drawings and like, here's a watercolor I did once.
Yes, exactly.
It's hard to know if like, is it veering too much into that, or is it kind of okay?
My opinion would be, if it was not collectively as good as this is, I would be like, put it on a separate page, right? Like don't put it below the fold where people are trying to learn more. Put it in a place where it's at least like you list it as bits and pieces, like even if you list it as pieces or bits or stuff or drawings or scribbles. But because there's common color palettes, the use of type is at such a high level, I think it's like a force multiplier, right? Like there's nothing in here that I look at that I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing, or that doesn't fit, because everything is well composed. The color palettes are reserved. There's like, anytime I see solid use of type, that's automatically like 2 grades up, because it's like, okay, there's somebody who knows the rules. Oh, there's somebody who's playing with the rules. Oh, there's somebody who actually like loves type foundries or likes making their own stuff. Like those are all lean in moments, right? Like that's all you're looking for on your reel, on your website, is just like, okay, strike someone's curiosity, get them to lean in, get them to click and like look for more, and try to build up. Like I'm always trying to build a story of who I'm going to call before I call them. And this is all storytelling to me when I see this stuff. Like I don't think there's not too much, there's not a lack of variety. It's not, the variety isn't too wild. Like it all feels cohesive. I do think if it's like so across the board that's like, oh, I have 2 things of UI UX, and I have a sock puppet, and I have a picture of me and my dog, like then definitely like save that for the about you, or the like kind of just like learn more about your personality. But here I don't feel that at all. I would definitely like lean in and want to know more about it.
Yeah, I agree. And also something you have to remember is that when you have your Instagram feed, people that want to hire you, that want to kind of see your work, they're going to scroll all the way down, and they're going to see like, wait, this is a year ago and it's still good, but now it got better.
Yeah.
Where is she going to be in another year? Like, this is, I'm hiring someone also with a vision. And so that's important as well. So the fact that you're saying, some of the work that's in there is good, it's great. Maybe you don't do it as much anymore, but the fact that a potential studio or a client that's going to hire you says, you know what, we don't have any projects right now with this kind of calligraphy or those kind of things, but there's something coming down the pipeline that may work, and she was working on it before, and we may not need it right now, but she can go back and use it as something in her toolkit.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate the power of that as well. People are going to look at your work and see that there's a progression, and in your case, not in everyone's case, it's a very fast progression, which tells people she's a fast learner. She, puts in the time, puts in the work. And so that is also part of the equation when you're looking at people. So don't underestimate that.
Yeah, I would extend that. I'd say yes. And also like generalist is not a dirty word, especially when you can express personality, right? Like that is like, if I can see that you have a certain, like a common, like level set of skills. Like, okay, you understand enough of the basics that you wouldn't get in trouble by, you know, having you team with another person. Then it's just like, okay, well, what else is there about this person? Like, I didn't know that you had the interest in calligraphy from watching your reel, right? Like, but then as I rolled down to see what else is, there's like, oh, that's like it's like hanging another lantern to build the string of like, this is the story of who you are, these are your interests. I think sometimes people think generalist just means like you don't know what you want to do, so you call yourself a generalist. But like, generalist can be like, you're a generalist with a major and a minor, or you're a generalist with like a couple software packages, but you have obsessions or curiosities or interests that color the fact that you're a generalist. Like, it's, but so many times people literally just put their name on the title and they say generalist, or they say motion designer, and then they've let all the air out of the tire, right? Like, it's like, oh, there's this cool mystery of like, what's this person going to be like? And in the first shot, you basically like, oh, there's no mystery, I don't have anything to offer. Like then it's just like, you're competing on rate, or you're competing on like, and that's the opposite direction you want to go, which I don't think you have that issue. But just for anyone listening, like, generalist can be something you can rally around. It doesn't have to be something that like, oh man, I'm not a specialist yet, when will I be one? You know, like, you can build up. I also think like a generalist is also honestly like a specialist, because if you're a senior, like a heavyweight senior generalist, that means like you're somebody who an art director can let run with a team while they're going and pitching another job or fixing a fire somewhere else. And that's one of the most rare things, you know, like, it's not a dirty word, it's like a huge plus at that point. So
Yeah.
No, that's good to hear, because like maybe later down the line I will want to specialize, but at the moment the thought of like limiting myself and not being able to kind of like explore all those avenues, like that'd be such a bummer.
Well, and you know what, I think that's what I was struggling to try to like figure out how to say to you, and I remind myself all the time. What I feel like you're expressing isn't that you're junior, isn't that you're generalist, is that you have a wild curiosity across software, across styles, across stories you want to tell. And that like very positive, enthusiastic curiosity with taste is, again, like one of those really, really rare recipes that the right studio will find you and will know how to nurture you, will know how to, they will be excited about being like, oh, you know what, we need to get Gina sitting next to Sarah Beth Morgan, and when she's leading a project, Gina will do the design for her, right? Or you'll be an assistant to the design, because that will allow you to grow into a place that no one other than that studio or that creative director or that company could offer, right? So like that's the kind of thing at the stage in your career you want to be like presenting. You want that to radiate out, which it is.
Yeah. There was an interesting question in the chat, and you don't have to answer it actually out of privacy. Maybe you shouldn't, but I think I know where the question, where the person asking may be coming from. They're asking like, how old is, you know, Gina? And again, you don't have to answer it, but I think the question is leading into like, wow, she looks very young, and like she has already all this mature body of work in such a short amount of time. And maybe the question is there an age where it's too young or too old to become a motion designer or become a designer? And I know everyone's kind of on a different path, but I do think it's a fair question. Like for me, I started I'm a late bloomer. I started in my late 30s. And so, you know, yes, a lot of students ask, like, is it too late for me to become a motion designer? Is it too late for me to study animation and follow my passion? Or should I just resign myself to, you know, my boring 9-to-5 job? And the answer is, if you put in the time and you put in the effort, yes, there is a chance for everyone. For someone as young as you, because you seem very young, or someone, you know, older. We've seen some older students really do very well. They just, you know, they kind of had it in them. They were kind of some hidden talent, and they put in the time and the effort and the work, and, you know, now they work in the industry. So I think that's where the question was going.
Yeah, I would say like to your point about Instagram, like everything is just based about trajectory and growth, right? Like, and a studio is looking at like the opportunity cost, right? Like if I bring someone in, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter like how expensive you are. You're starting here, and with my unique set of factors that I can surround you and support you, you could turn into X, right? And that could be someone who's 17, who's decided not to go to college, and that could be someone who's like 42. And I'm going to totally apologize, Frank. You're going to know this person's name, but I know we have a TA who also has taken classes, who's not 17 or 18 years old, that did a like 100 style frames project. And I feel so bad that I'm forgetting their name.
Oh, Tony Aglada.
Yes, he is amazing, and his work is stunning. And if you want to do the same thing you can do with Gina, you can go to Tony's Instagram and go back to when he was in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of, he made a style frame and then he posted the next one, and they're all nicely formatted so they match. And it is one of the most impressive like documentaries of growth and like personal like rocketing trajectory of anyone, regardless of age, right? And he has a completely different like work life situation now than when he started trying to be like, maybe I should be a designer. Maybe there's something else I could do. So I fully believe like it takes a lot of work either way, right? Like there's benefits of being young, but there's also benefits of being a little older and having the experience of seeing different things and knowing how things work. And maybe you go down a few less blind alleys because you also have the ticking clock. But yeah, I especially, I will say to anyone listening right now, motion design needs you now. They need you yesterday. If you're watching this, right? Like there are so many jobs and so many opportunities and so many gigs where they need 5 people and they can only get 3. And they're desperate to find more people who want to do the work you want to do, to the point where they're willing to take on someone a little bit more junior or someone remote or someone freelance that they would not have 2 years ago. Like the world is ripe with opportunity in motion design right now. I don't know how long that's going to last. I hope it lasts for a very long time, if not forever, but now is the time to like take advantage of that opportunity.
That's one of my favorite things about being involved in School of Motion courses, actually, is seeing like the range of other students taking the courses, and you get to see like they come from all these different interesting backgrounds. And I think sometimes people feel kind of embarrassed, like if they don't come from a design background, or maybe they're a bit older and they've already got a career in a different industry. But actually, I feel like what they are bringing with them from those experiences is like such a bonus, because they've learned all this stuff that they can now transfer to this new industry, and that's what's going to kind of differentiate them. It's like there's someone I saw on the square who I think she's recently switched to motion design, but she came from documentaries, and I was like, oh, that is so interesting, because I bet she's got like this eye for certain things that no other motion designers have. And so I feel like that kind of cross-pollination of industries and disciplines is kind of where you get the most interesting kind of people.
Yeah, I mean that's where the community part of School of Motion, like I've always said, the TAs in the community are really the secret sauce. If you put your time in and you really start trying to connect with people and you really work with your TAs, that's where the career changes. That's where the trajectories start booming, is really utilizing those two equally together.
Yep. So speaking of the older ones, I think we're kind of close to the time where our children are starting to ask for, like my kids got to eat as well. But this has been so much fun. Like I could be here all day. This is so much fun to talk about design, talk shop. I really, really have, it's really, to me, the most rewarding thing as a TA is to see, the Ginas, to see the Markuses, to see the Kaitlyns, the progression. It's so rewarding at the end of the session to see someone be like, yes, I got this project. So this is why I got into School of Motion, and I love to see people kind of progress. So I'm always like in love talking to students and seeing their progress. It's so fun.
Yeah, and this is another really cool thing about School of Motion, is that like this is where you start building those connections, right? Like I remember when I think I was in design boot camp and Jordan Bergman was in there, and nobody knew his name, nobody knew who he was, and he was just starting to get momentum on putting some really cool design frames together and starting to get the sense like, oh, this is something you can do. You can be in the course with someone like Gina and like work alongside and have the growth alongside them. And those become relationships. Those become networking opportunities. Those become potentially ways to like find the next job or start the next company. I want to ask you, Gina, before we go, are you taking another class next semester? And if you are, what class are you taking?
So the only thing I am taking this term is a break, because
well deserved. Yeah, you've definitely earned it.
It's not to say that there aren't ones that I want to take. It's like so tempting, but I know that would be absolutely the wrong thing to do right now. I would be so burnt out.
Well, for anybody who's not burnt out, we just want to say for sure, let people know that the fall session starts, I think, next Monday, October 4th. Registration is still open. We have our grid of all the courses that are available, that are out there. We talked about the design ones. I will also say, just as a wild card out there, if you are into 3D at all, Lights, Camera, Render, in my book, actually is a design course. It's a cinematography course. It is a filmmaking course. It is a storytelling course. But all those design principles we've been talking about now, if you've ever wondered how those come into play when you get into animation or you get into 3D, Lights, Camera, Render is the place where you put all that stuff on display. So other important thing to let people know is that some of those courses that are in that grid that just got shown, they will not be available winter session, not this session, but the next session after. We're going to take a hiatus on a couple of these. So if you've been thinking about trying to improve your demo reel, or you really want to get into Octane and learning how to light and render and move a camera, those courses, it's the time to take them is right now, is these signing up this next couple of days before the sessions start up. And I think with that, Gina, thank you so much. This was amazing. This is our first showcase. You were the spotlighted final showcase. We are going to hopefully do these more often, so you might be able to follow in Gina's footsteps. If you catch the eye of a couple TAs, and there starts to be some buzz about the work you're doing, redesigning all the different work that comes through, or whatever it might be. But hopefully everybody's enjoyed this. Gina, thank you so much. I'm so lucky to just sit down and talk to you, see your work, hear like your growth is insane. It's very exciting to see.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. Like, I don't really know anyone who does motion design, so it's just like a rare treat to get to talk to someone about this. So thank you.
Well, everybody who's watching, you should at least go and follow Gina on Instagram, and at least reach out and say hello. Say you're a fellow motion designer.
Do it.
Awesome. Frank, thank you so much. Hopefully this will be the first of many, many student showcases. Thank you for all the critiques. And until then, we'll be seeing you soon. We'll be seeing you hopefully in a couple of days, actually. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.